Welcome to this YSL Excel VBA tutorial. In this video we'll explain some basic web scraping techniques using Selenium and Google Chrome. So we'll start with a quick example of opening up Google Chrome and navigating to a website. Then we'll explain the various ways you can reference and interact with elements on a web page, and that includes typing text into an input box and clicking buttons to navigate to different pages. We'll have a quick section on how you check if elements exist, and later on in the video we'll look at looping through collections of elements, doing something to each one in turn, and we'll use that technique to write tables from a website into an Excel worksheet. Towards the end of the video we'll also explain how you can extract hyperlinks from a web table and then assign those hyperlinks to cells in the Excel worksheet. So quite a lot to do in this one, but it's a bit of fun, so let's get started. Here's a basic example of the type of thing we'll aim to create in this video. It's basically a search system which allows you to hunt for videos on the YSL website. So you can type in a search phrase into cell C2, so I've typed in what I think is an appropriate one for this video, scraping websites. And then when you click the search for videos button, it fires up an instance of Chrome to use the search feature on the YSL website to return the list of videos matching your search phrase. So it returns it to a table and it includes the hyperlink, so you can just directly visit those videos by clicking the appropriate link. The way it works is a little too quick to describe as it's actually happening. So what basically happens is very much like manually going through this process, but doing it much more quickly. So it navigates to the YSL homepage in an instance of Google Chrome. It types something into the search box here, so I'll type in the same thing, scraping websites, and then it clicks the Go button to return a set of search results. We might find stuff to do with scraping websites in various different categories, so it will loop over the range of categories that it finds, and if there is one called video tutorials, it will click on that one to expand that section and locate the table in there, and then it loops through all the rows and columns on that table, or in that table I should say, to return all the various values, including the hyperlinks as you've just seen. It's not the most sophisticated example you'll ever use Selenium to create, but it's a nice one to demonstrate all the fundamental techniques that you will pretty much always use. So if you haven't used Selenium before, then this will give you the basics for doing pretty much anything else you can think of. If you do want to follow along, of course, then you will need to make sure you have Selenium Basic installed, and for your convenience I've created a video which explains exactly how to get it set up. It's one of my shorter videos, you'll be pleased to hear, so it's only 12 minutes long, and probably 5 minutes of that is just me rambling. So yeah, the good stuff in there you can find fairly easily using the chapters to get the software installed. There is a bunch of links. I only posted that today. Look at how many views. Guys, thank you so much for this. I always appreciate all the views and the comments and the likes. Even if I don't get a chance to reply to all of them, it's always much appreciated. So there's a bunch of links in that video's description so that you can get all the relevant software you'll need. I am going to be using Google Chrome for this example, but it doesn't have to be Chrome. The beauty of using Selenium is it genuinely doesn't care which web browser you're using. It doesn't judge you if you want to use Microsoft Edge instead of Chrome. So feel free to use whichever browser you like. Assuming you have got the Selenium Basic package installed and you've got your WebDriver installed for the browser you're going to work with, we'll open up a brand new workbook in Excel, and then we'll get started with adding the reference to Selenium. So I've closed down the example I had open, and in the new blank workbook I've just created, I'm going to head to the Developer tab and then choose to open the Visual Basic Editor. From here, the first thing I need to do is set a reference to the Selenium library. So I need to head to the Tools menu and choose References, and then in the list which appears, I can type in the letter S to jump down to the section beginning with the letter S, scroll down a bit further and find the Selenium type library, and then check the box next to that. Then I can click OK, and the next thing I'll do is insert a module, so I can right-click into the Project Explorer, choose Insert Module, and then I'll set up my basic subroutine, which will be called, what shall it be called? Let's call it Scrape YSL Videos. There we go. The next thing we need to do is create a variable which can hold a reference to an instance of the web browser we'd like to use. For my example, I'm going to use Google Chrome, so I'm going to declare a variable called ch as, and then I'm going to look in the Selenium type library and look for a class called Chrome Driver. Of course, if you were using a different browser, then you might want to use an Edge driver or a Firefox driver, or whatever your preference is, providing you have the driver for that browser installed. But as I say, I'm going to use Chrome, so Chrome driver, and then I'm going to create a new instance of that driver. So I'm going to say set ch equals new selenium.chrome driver. And then I'd just like to start the application so I can see it running. So I'm going to say ch.start. Having done that, I'm going to run a quick little test to see what happens. So I'm going to run this subroutine, and I'll see Chrome does indeed pop up, but then it also instantly disappears, which is a little bit frustrating, particularly as I would like to be able to show you things that happen in the web browser as we go along through the video. The problem is that when the variable goes out of scope at the end of the subroutine, it automatically destroys any instance of that browser. A simple way to get around that would be to declare the variable at the top of the module. So I can remove my declaration of my ch variable so that it sits at the top of the module below option explicit, but before any subroutines. And then if I just do the exact same thing as I've done previously, I can run the subroutine and I'll see Chrome appears, but it doesn't immediately close itself down when the subroutine ends. It's conventional when you declare variables at the module level rather than within a subroutine to use the word private or public. So I'm just going to modify that to say private ch as selenium.chrome driver. And then if I run the subroutine again, just to prove that it doesn't make any difference, we'll see Chrome pops up and then I can manually close it down myself. The next thing I need to do is point the browser to a particular website. So I can do that in a couple of different ways, but a fairly common and simple way to do it is to use the get method of the driver object. So I can say ch.get followed by a space and then enter the URL of the site I want to navigate to. It's the only compulsory parameter, so I can enter in some double quotes https://www.wisal.co.uk. I should know that address fairly well by now. So there we go. Having done that, I can run that subroutine again, and we'll find that Chrome opens up, and when it has done so, it will then navigate to the URL you've requested. So that's nice and easy, and the technique works perfectly well, and if that was the only URL of the Wisal website you were going to enter into your code, then that's almost certainly the technique you would use. However, if you were writing a longer procedure where you wanted to explicitly navigate to other pages on the Wisal website, so for example blogs or exercises or videos or whatever that happens to be, then you're going to find yourself writing out the same base URL multiple times. So if this was what you were trying to do, there's an alternative technique you can use to save yourself a bit of maintenance. Let's close down that instance of Chrome, and then I'm going to go to the end of the start method and type in a space to see my two optional parameters, browser and base URL. It's the base URL that I'm interested in, so I can get to that parameter in a couple of ways. I could just type in a comma. Alternatively, and I think is better, although a bit more effort, type in the name of the parameter, followed by a colon and an equals. What I can then do is copy this URL to the base URL, and then when I get a page, I don't need to specify the entire URL of the page I want to get. I can just tag on everything from the end of this base URL. So for example, if I wanted to get to the home page, I can just type in a /, and then if I run the subroutine again, I'll end up eventually, there we go, on the Wisal homepage. But if I wanted to get to the videos page, then I can close that instance down, and then I can say /videos. And then when I run the subroutine again, this time I'll end up again eventually. There we go, on the videos page instead. So again, this is useful if we wanted to navigate to lots of different pages on the Wisal website. But for this example, we just want to navigate to the home page. So I'm going to take it back to get /, and we'll proceed from there. Now that we've landed on the correct page, we want to interact with some of the elements on it. And in order to do that, we need to know how to identify those elements. One way to identify elements is to inspect them in a web browser. So I'm going to head over to Google Chrome again. It doesn't have to be the same browser, by the way. And then I'm going to head over to the Wisal homepage. And I want to, first of all, interact with this input box to type in my search phrase. I can right-click on that search box and then choose to inspect it. The name of this right-click menu option may be slightly different in different browsers. I think it's Inspect Element in Internet Explorer. It's Inspect in the new version of Microsoft Edge, but it should be fairly obvious from the name of the option which one to choose. I'm going to click Inspect, and that's going to open up an extra panel on the right-hand side of the screen, which identifies the thing I've just right-clicked on. It's highlighted here in pale blue. In fact, let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see that a little more clearly. So we've got several options for identifying this specific object. I could use the name of its tag. So the very first thing inside the angle brackets there is the name of the tag. So it identifies the type of object we're looking at. So this is an input object. It's nested inside a form tag, which is nested inside a div tag, etc. Now you can probably already tell that tag might not be a good way to identify a single specific object because there may be multiple items with the same tag. You can see there are lots of div tags on this page. An alternative way would be to use the class, so I could enter the class name. It's fairly unlikely there's going to be another element with the same class called search on this page, but you can't guarantee that. ID would be the best one to go for if you could guarantee there were unique IDs for the objects, but this particular element doesn't have an ID. It does, however, have a name attribute. So what we could do for this particular example is use the name attribute, it's called what, and then try to return a reference to that object using the word what. So let's just zoom back out again and head back to the VB editor. In order to do this, we need to use one of the find methods of the browser. So I can say ch dot, and then I want to find an element. And you can see that when I start typing in the word find, I get a list of lots of methods for identifying elements by various different attributes. So the one I want to go for would be the find element by name. So I'm going to enter that. Then I'm going to open up a set of round brackets. There's a single compulsory parameter in there, which is called name. Well, I already know what its name is. It's called what. So I'll enter the name what as a string and then close the double quotes and close the round brackets. Now, assuming that element has been found, I want to do something to it. Just as a very simple example, I'm going to send some keystrokes to that element. So there's a method you can apply to an element called sendKeys, which does very much like what it says it does. It's sendKeys, and then I can type in a space, and then I can enter the keys that I want to pass in. So just for a simple example, in some double quotes, I'll say XL VBA, close the double quotes, and that's my code. All right, so let's run that subroutine and we'll find a new instance of Chrome gets opened up. And it should now type in XLVBA into the element we've identified. The next thing I'd like to do is simulate clicking on the Go button to perform the search. So let's just close down this instance of Chrome, and then I'll head back to the one that I already have open and I'm already inspecting objects or elements. And you can probably tell already, immediately below the input tag, there's a button tag. And if I highlight that with the mouse, I don't need to click on it, just move the mouse cursor over it. You can see it highlights the corresponding item on the page. If I wanted to be absolutely certain, of course, I could right-click on that element and choose to inspect it, and that would highlight it in the Inspect panel on the right-hand side. Just to zoom in there, you can see that this button doesn't actually have a name, so we need a different approach to finding this element. We could find it by tag name, of course, or by tag, so we could find the button, but again, it's kind of likely there will be more than one button tag on the same page. We have a class attribute, which looks like it's something fairly specific. Again, I doubt there's more than one element with the same class on this page. So let's give this one a whirl. I'm going to try to search or find an element by class search submit. I can double click search submit in this elements panel and then just press Ctrl and C to copy that to the clipboard. What I can then do is head back to my Visual Basic editor, and then I can type in ch.find element by class, and then open some round brackets and some double quotes, enter the name that I've just copied, so I can press Ctrl and V, close the double quotes, close the round brackets, and then I want to apply a different method to it. I don't want to send keys to that object, I want to click it. So I can type in a full stop and then look for the click method. And it genuinely is that simple. Very much simulating what a human being would do to interact with this web page. So let's give that a quick try then. If I run this subroutine at that stage, and I'll see it should fire up. I might briefly see the home page flash up. There it is. And then it immediately lands me on the search results page. So everything's working quite nicely so far. It's all fairly simple, isn't it? But before we get carried away too much, it's worthwhile considering what happens when things go wrong. So let's say, for example, somebody changed the design of this website and perhaps changed the classes used, or perhaps changed the names of the objects we're looking for. We have no control over that. It could happen, but we need to write our code in such a way that it doesn't just fall flat on its face when things go wrong. Let's just head back to the VB editor. Let's pretend that we'd looked for our search box by a different name. Let's say we search for it by search input or something along those lines. And then after we'd used this code for a while, somebody changed the design of the website and renamed that search input box as what? So while our code would have worked previously, if we attempted to run it at this point, it now no longer does. We'll see the web page fires up, of course, but nothing gets typed into that search box. And if I close down that instance of Chrome, I'll find a runtime error sitting behind the scenes in the VB code. That's not particularly helpful. If only there was a convenient way to check if an element is present on the page. Fortunately, in Selenium, there is an incredibly easy way to do this. Immediately before we try to send keys to that search input element, I'll give myself a couple of blank lines and say if ch dot is element present. Who could have thought of a better name for a method or a function which returns whether or not something exists? There is one small problem with this, a slight complication I should say rather than a problem. In order to find the element I'm interested in, I have to use something called a by object. It's not a particularly meaningful name, by, but if you think about the methods we've used here so far, find element by name, find element by class, that's kind of what the by object is dealing with. So just to show you how one of those works, I'm going to head up to the top of the subroutine, just ignoring that my code has a syntax error at the moment, and I'm going to declare a new object or a new variable called findBy as selenium.by. I then need to create a new instance of that, and I can do it in a couple of ways. One would be to do what I've done with the Chrome driver. I could explicitly set findBy to be equal to, if I can type it properly I could, equal to a new selenium.by. That would work perfectly well. Alternatively, I could create an auto-instancing by object or by variable. So I could say dim findBy as new selenium.by. So that would create a new instance of the by class whenever I needed it. To make use of that, what I then need to do is head back to the line which is currently indicated with a syntax error, and inside the isElementPresent method, I want to say findBy followed by a full stop. Most of the methods in here relate to methods you can use in the findElement method. So findElement by name, there's a name option. FindElement by class, there's a class option. There's an ID option, there's a CSS, there's a tag option, etc. The one I'm going to use here is the name method, so findBy.name, and then in some round brackets I can pass in the name of the thing I'm trying to look for. So let's pretend I was going to look for the search input. I'll just copy and paste that rather than risk mistyping it. And then I can close a set of round brackets for the name method, a set of round brackets for the isElementPresent method, and then type in then, a couple of blank lines, and the end if. Now the isElementPresent method returns a Boolean value, so that's either true or false. And currently the way I've written my if statement, it's going to do something in this section of code here if the element is present, so if this returns true. I want to flip that around to check if the element is not present. I can do that in a couple of ways. I could check if the result of that expression equals false. Alternatively, I could just say at the beginning here, I could say if not ch.isElementPresent. Either will work, both are perfectly acceptable. Choose the one you like the best. When I've established that the element does not exist, what I'm then going to do is first of all quit from my web browser. I'm going to say ch.quit. In reality, you might like to leave it visible on screen so you can look at the state of the web page at that point in time and check what is going on. But just for convenience here, I'd like to show you how to quit the browser, and then I'll show a simple message box which says could not find search input box, or dirch input box as I've spelt it there. Let me just correct that. And then I'll show a VB exclamation symbol on the message box as well. And then finally I will exit from the subroutine. Okay, so I know that this object doesn't exist, so I know that this if statement is going to be triggered. So let's run that subroutine, and we should see that when the front page loads, it immediately closes down. Straight away, there was no delay there almost at all from the home page loading to it telling me that the object doesn't exist. I can click OK at that point, and then the subroutine will end. Now, you'll often encounter websites whose content is created dynamically, often using JavaScript behind the scenes. So when you first load the web page, all the elements you can interact with might not actually be present at that time. It could take some time for those elements to be generated. So one of the nice things you can do with the isElementPresent method is put in a delay. Give it a chance to actually create the object you're looking for before it immediately says, no, it doesn't exist, I'm going away, and quits the application. So in the isElementPresent method, just before the final closed parenthesis there, I can type in a comma, and you'll see there's an optional parameter there called timeout as long. Now, the value you enter here is the number in milliseconds that you want to give the method chance to load the element on the page. So let's say we wanted to delay this for 3 seconds. If I enter a value of 3000, if I run the same subroutine again now, you'll find that rather than it immediately closing down when the home page loads, it delays for 3 seconds, giving the web page a chance to actually generate the elements before it then finally decides, yep, it's definitely not there, so I'll close down and give you that message. Okay, so now that we know we won't generate a runtime error if that element isn't there, we can change our name that we're searching for back to the original what. We know that does actually exist, so let's change that in 2 places, in the findBy.name method and in the ch.findElementByName method. We should then do something similar to establish whether or not the search submit button exists. This is one of the nice things about using a generic findBy object. If I just copy all of this code here and place it immediately above the line which clicks my search submit button. So I've just copied the entire if statement, and I'm just going to paste that immediately above the findElementBy class. In the findBy object, rather than using the name method, I can use the class method. And then I could copy and paste the search submit button, or class name I should say, into that class method. There's still a timeout property there for the isElementPresent method, so I've still got the 3-second delay. I should maybe change my message box, so I could say could not find submit button or something like that. There we go, submit button, and then we will avoid seeing a runtime error if the submit button is not there. So having added all that extra code, it does make it a lot longer of course, but it's worthwhile doing this sort of stuff. Let's run that subroutine one more time, and we should see that everything goes back to normal. It finds the search box and the search button and ends up on the search results page. Okay, so we're making progress. What we need to do now is deal with the search results. Let me just close down this instance of Chrome and then head back to the one I already have open. And I'm just going to type in the same search phrase we typed in programmatically, Excel VBA, click go, and then land on the results page. So it's the video tutorials results section that I'm particularly interested in. I'm going to right click on video tutorials and choose inspect. And if I look over now in the elements list, I'd normally get quite excited about this. I get excited about the saddest of things, but anyway, the ID. Usually an ID is a fantastic thing to find because it's a unique way to reference a particular object or element on a page. So if we knew the unique ID of the video section, accordion part 4, then we could ordinarily reference it. However, what if we search for a phrase where we returned different results sections, different numbers of results sections, and the accordion part for the videos wasn't part 4. Let me just go back and search for something different. Let me search for scraping websites. We returned fewer results for that. So scraping websites. I do have some video tutorials, but if I right click on this one and choose inspect, this one sadly isn't called accordion part 4, it's called accordion part 1. So sadly we can't use this, what would normally be a great thing, the unique ID. We need to think of something different. What we're going to do is capture a reference to all of the elements that have the class WO form accordion part. So we're going to gather all of those up into a single variable and then loop through the collection of accordion parts to find the one we're interested in. Let's deal with getting the entire set of accordion parts first. I'm going to double click on one of those just to highlight its name and then copy that to the clipboard. And then I'm going to head back to my VB editor and I'm going to declare a variable at the top of this page or at the top of this subroutine that can hold multiple elements. So I'm going to say dim, I'll call it result sections as Selenium dot web elements. You'll see there's a web element and a web elements. You can probably tell from the names that one can hold an instance, a single instance of an element, and the other can hold a collection of elements. So in this example, we're going to use web elements. While we're here, we're also going to declare a variable which will hold a single web element. So I'm going to just say dim result section as Selenium dot web element. Then we can head down below, just below where we've clicked our search submit button, and we're going to say set result sections equals ch dot, and then we're going to try to find elements by class. So we've already used find element singular. Now we can use find elements by class. If I scroll down far enough, there it is. And the only difference between this method and the one we've already used is that this one can return a collection of objects. So find elements by class, open some round brackets. I'm going to paste in the class name I've just copied from my instance of Chrome, so I can open and close some double quotes and then paste in that name that I copied, and then close the round brackets, and that will return all of the result sections to that variable. Okay, now that I've captured the collection of result sections, I'd like to loop over that collection to print out some useful information about each one. To do that, we can use, well, we've got a few choices here for the various loops in VBA. I'm going to use a for each loop to do this. So I'm going to say for each result section in result sections. So fairly standard code to loop through a collection of objects. A couple of blank lines and then say next result section. And then inside that for each statement, I'm going to debug.print the result section dot text. So the text method there returns the textual representation of that element on the page. Now then, if I were to run this subroutine, we'll see that Chrome opens up again, of course. We're searching for Excel VBA, so we'll get quite a few sections for this one. There we go. And you'll see that the list of sections we've got, or accordion parts, as the class is named, training pages 8, publications 1, miscellaneous pages 1, etc. And we can see those items reflected in the immediate window. If you don't have that displayed, it's the view menu immediate window option that you'll need. And we've also got a question mark below each one as well, so there's obviously another element in there which doesn't have a sensible textual representation, and we could probably find out what that was if we looked at the various sub-elements in each accordion part. But I'm reasonably happy with what we've returned. We're clearly looping through the collection of objects that we're interested in. Now, we don't want to do something to every single result section, we only care about doing something to the video tutorial section. And now that we've got access to the text of each section, we can use that to identify the one we're interested in. So we can simply add an if statement above the debug.print statement inside our for each loop. We can say if results section.text. And I don't want to use the equals operator because, of course, the actual full text here that's returned will be different depending on the number of results. So I want to essentially check whether the section text begins with video tutorials and the space and the open round brackets there as well. So I'm going to just copy that from the immediate window. And then in the if statement, I'm going to use the like operator. So I can say if the result section text like, and then in some double quotes, video tutorials, open round brackets, followed by an asterisk, which is the wildcard character. So that's essentially the same as saying if the result section text begins with video tutorials. I'll add the then keyword to the end of that line, indent my debug.print statement, and then don't forget the end if at the end. Okay, so having done that now, if I just clear the contents of the immediate window and then run the subroutine again, we should find this time it only returns the name of, or the text of, the video tutorial section. So in the immediate window, that's exactly what we've got. The question mark, by the way, I think is related to the down arrow symbol that's presented on the section that you can click on. So there's no way to represent that symbol in the immediate window, so it's replaced with a question mark symbol instead. We should just check that this works if we test for a different search phrase. So rather than Excel VBA, let's go for scraping websites. And then even though the number of results will be different, we should still return the video tutorials section text. So it's in a different position, it's a different number of results, but we still get that item printed out into the immediate window. Now, of course, it is possible that the search phrase we enter doesn't actually return any result sections at all. If I go back to this open instance of Chrome and I type in some complete nonsense text in there and click go, I don't get any search results, which means it's a little bit pointless trying to loop through a non-existent collection of objects. In fact, what would happen were there no sections to return? Let's close that down and let's find out. So if we change what we're searching for to some completely nonsensical text and then run the subroutine again, we'll find this time when it enters the search box, types in that, returns no results. Back in VBA, well, nothing happens. It's a little different to trying to find a specific element by name. We saw earlier on, if you try to find a specific element by name or by class and that object doesn't exist, then it returns a runtime error. When you try to return a collection of elements, so whenever you're using one of the find elements methods, it simply returns an empty collection, or a collection with a count of 0, if that makes more sense. Which makes it a little bit more convenient for us to do something different. We don't have to use the isElementPresent method and the findBy object. What we can do here simply, after we've captured all the result sections, if there weren't any, the count of items in that collection will be 0. So we can simply say if result sections dot count equals 0, then, and I'll add an end if, and then inside those two lines I'll do something simple like ch.quit. We'll show a message box saying nothing at all was found, and with a VB exclamation symbol, and then we can simply exit from the subroutine, so exit sub. Okay, so I'll clear the contents of the immediate window again, and then run that subroutine one more time. And although we won't return any sections, it will then tell us that that's the case and close down the instance of Chrome, and it won't therefore enter that pointless loop or do any of the other things that we'll do below this either. Okay, so we've identified our video section. What we now need to do is get at the table which sits inside that section. So again, let's head back to this instance of Chrome and we can expand our video tutorial section. So we've just clicked on that element, and inside there is a table. If I right click on any cell in that table and choose inspect, I'll find that I end up somewhere nested inside this table tag in the elements list. So you can see that the table is nested inside the div tag for the form accordion part. I want to find this specific table, the one that belongs to the video section, but it doesn't have a specific name, it doesn't have a specific ID, or even a class, it's just a generic table tag. I want to find the one single table inside an existing element. And one of the really nice things about the web element class in Selenium is that you can apply the find by methods to it to find elements which sit within that element. If this isn't making sense, hopefully the code itself will. So I want to find a table tag which sits within the element called WiseOwl form accordion part for the video tutorial section. Okay, so let's head back to the Visual Basic Editor. And then let's scroll up to the top, and I'm going to declare a new variable. I'm going to call it dim video table as selenium.webElement. So it's another singular element. If I now scroll down towards the bottom, and just below this debug.print statement, in fact, let me just comment out the debug.print statement. If the result section is the video section, then I'm going to set my video table to be equal to. I want to find an element by tag, but I don't want to do that by applying the find element to the entire browser. I want to apply that same method to the result section that I'm currently looking at. So I'm going to say result section dot find element by tag, and then in some round brackets and some double quotes, the tag name, nice and simple, is table. Close the double quotes and then close the round brackets, and that will capture a reference to the video table. Just a little bit of housekeeping next. If we're looping through the results sections and we do find the video tutorial section, then it's pointless continuing this loop afterwards if there were more sections below it. So a very quick, simple instruction to add in here. After we've captured a reference to the video table, we can exit the for loop to avoid processing the other sections unnecessarily. Another thing we should take into account is that we could return some sections, but not include the video tutorial section. So let's add, after this loop, we'll check if the video table variable is nothing, and if so, that tells us that we had some sections returned but no videos. So we can add an if statement. We can say if video table is nothing, then a couple of blank lines and an end if, and I will once again quit from the browser, so ch.quit, and then show a message box which says something like no videos were found, and then a VBA exclamation symbol, and then simply exit from the subroutine before we do anything else. We'll then need to change the search phrase to return something, but not videos. So our current search phrase is nonsense. Let's change that. Let's go for DAX measures. I know we have lots of material on the website about DAX and measures, but I'm pretty sure there aren't any videos yet. So let's run that subroutine now, and it will do the usual thing, but tell us that no videos were found. And just to prove that that does actually return something, let's just go back to this instance of Chrome and search for DAX measures. There we go. So we get training pages, miscellaneous pages, blogs and newsletters, but no videos. Well, at least not yet. Hint, hint. So there we go. So we've handled a bit of, or done a bit of basic housekeeping to make sure that we return sensible messages according to the values returned. Okay, so we're at the stage now where we can write out the results of this table into a worksheet in the workbook. There are several different ways we can do this, but there's one particularly quick and simple, if a bit limited, way to do this using Selenium. If we reach this stage of our code after this if statement, we definitely have a video table in this variable. So what we can do is say video table, and then we're going to use a method of the web element called as table. What we can then do is apply to that the method toXL. We've got two choices here. We could say data, which returns an array of all the information in the table, or use the toXL method, which will just write the entire table into a worksheet, providing we specify where it should go. So I'm going to use the toXL method, and the target parameter, it is optional, but I'm going to specify I want my target to be the top left cell on a brand new worksheet. So to do that, I'm going to say this workbook dot worksheets dot add, and then that returns a reference to the worksheet that has been created, and I want to reference range A1 on that sheet. And it genuinely is that simple, that one single instruction. Let's go and enter a search phrase which we know definitely returns some results. So we'll go back from DAX measures, we'll go to, let's go for scraping websites this time. And then if we run the subroutine, we'll find some video tutorials, 9 video tutorials. We can then have a quick look back in the Excel workbook and find the layout isn't particularly nice. I haven't really spent any effort on that, of course, yet, but you can clearly see that we've written out the 9 results, including the column headers for those videos. You can obviously see some obvious limitations here as well, however, I suspect. One being this slightly weird formatting for that cell. It's changed the row height for that cell. It's done a wrap text thing in there. And it's also not included the URLs or the hyperlinks to the URLs of the videos themselves. This is fantastic when you have just basic raw table data you want to copy out into a new worksheet. You can easily tidy up the formatting of this afterwards with some basic VBA code. The really irritating thing for us though is that it doesn't include the hyperlinks. And if we want to get at the hyperlinks, then slightly annoyingly, we're going to need to loop through each table cell in this table and extract the hyperlinks and write them into the cells individually in the new worksheet. Okay, I'll start by tidying up the workbook. I'll delete this extra worksheet and then we can head back to the Visual Basic editor. And to make this work, I think I'll create a separate subroutine which we can use to process the video table. I'm just going to comment out the line that we've just used to write the entire table out in one go. And then below this subroutine, write a new subroutine called process table. And then I'll create a parameter for that, which I'll call table to process as selenium.webElement. Couple of blank lines in there. And then we can start writing the code to process each individual row of the table, followed by each cell in the rows we're looking at. Let's declare some variables then to help us work through the rows and cells in the table. I'm going to start by declaring a variable called allRows as selenium.webElements. So this is going to contain the collection of rows, or at least the collection of web elements with the table row tag. And then I'm also going to declare a variable called singleRow as selenium.webElement. So this is very similar to the structure we created for the results section and results sections. Similarly, we want to be able to then loop through the individual cells on each row. So I'm going to declare another variable called allRowCells as selenium.webElements, and then dim single cell as selenium.webElement. I'll spell that correctly eventually. There we go. Okay. The first thing I'd like to do then is to capture a reference to all the rows of the table. Just to show a little bit of information about the tags involved in a table. You may have spotted these earlier on, but if I switch back here to the instance of Chrome I have open and have a look at the elements list, you can see that within the table tag, we've got a table body tag, and then each individual row is indicated with the TR tag. Within a table row, you've either got a TH tag when you're in the header row of the table, or a TD tag when you're in just a basic data row. So we need to be able to handle all those situations, whether we're on a header row or on a data row. And we need to do this for every single row in the entire table, no matter how many there are. So to make that work, let's go back to the VB editor. The first thing I'll do is capture a reference to all of the rows in the table to process. So I'm going to pass that in, of course, from the previous subroutine. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to say process table, and then I'm going to pass in my video table to this procedure. So video table will come in via the table to process parameter. And then I'm going to say set all rows. Beg pardon, I'll try that again. Set all rows equal to table to process. And then I'm going to find elements by tag. I want to find all of the table rows. So find elements by tag. Okay, I should have just written the entire thing out when I'd reached that stage. The tag name that I'm looking for this time for table rows is TR. So I can enter TR in some double quotes and some round brackets, and that will capture all of the rows. So from there, what I can do is write a for each loop. I can say for each single row in all rows, give myself a couple of blank lines, and then say next single row. So that little loop there will loop through all of the rows in the table that we've passed in. Now on each row, I want to capture all of the individual cells on that row. And that's a little tricky because I've got two different tags to look for here. It could be either TD or TH. Most of the rows will be TD rows. There's only ever one header row. So what I'm going to try to do to begin with is to say set all row cells to be equal to single row dot find elements by tag. I can find that quickly, find elements by tag, and then I'm going to use the TD tag to find the table data cells. What I could then do is check whether or not I've found any cells with a TD tag. So like we did earlier on to find the count of result sections, I'm going to say if all row cells dot count equals 0, then I'll just add my end if before filling in the details. So if I don't currently have anything in the all row cells variable, I'm going to say set all row cells to be equal to, and then it's just the same here, single row dot find elements by tag. So I'll just copy and paste this. I should have copied and pasted the entire line really, and then change the tag name from TD to TH instead. Okay, so having captured the all the cells in the row, we can then loop through those, and we can do that by saying for each single cell in all row cells, a couple of blank lines, and then say next single cell. So there's the basic loop structure set up. We've got the inner loop looping through the cells in the row and the outer loop looping through the rows in the table. So just to establish whether or not we're finding anything, we could use a debug.print statement to write out the text of each cell into the immediate window. So let's say something like this. Let's say debug.print, try that again, debug.print, single cell dot text. Okay, looks good. So at this point, I'm going to scroll back up to the original procedure, just check what we're looking for. So we're looking for scraping websites, which does indeed return some results, so that's good. So we can just run that subroutine by clicking somewhere within it, clicking the run button or pressing F5, and it will find 9 video tutorials, and it will print out, well, apparently, absolutely nothing. Although it has printed something. Look, you can see the scroll bar in the immediate window has indeed changed height. Just to prove that, let's just clear out the contents of the immediate window, so there's currently nothing there yet. And if I go back up to the original subroutine and run it again, you'll see that the scroll bar on the immediate window does change height as it writes out some values. But the values it's writing out, or the text that it's writing out, apparently is blank. Now there's a good reason for this. It's because the text property isn't returning some actual text because the table isn't currently displayed. So what we need to do in the main routine, once we've found the video section, we need to make sure that the table is exposed to the browser by clicking on the result section object. So let's just do that. It's a nice simple thing to add in. So in the if statement, which checks whether we're in the video tutorial section, before we set the video table variable, we can say result section dot click, just like we did for the button earlier on. Okay, so let's have a look at what difference that makes now if I click back into that subroutine and run it one more time. we will see this time that, you can see that in the background I hope already. First of all, on the Chrome browser you can see that we have indeed expanded that section to expose the text, and then in the immediate window you can now see that we have indeed printed out the contents from each cell into that window. Okay, let's move on then to writing out these values into an actual worksheet in the workbook. We'll scroll back down to the process table procedure, and in here we're going to declare a few new variables. I'd like a variable to hold a reference to the output worksheet, so I'm going to say dim output sheet as worksheet. Then I'm going to have two variables to keep track of the row number and the column number. So I'm going to say dim row num as long, and then on the same row I'm going to say col num as long as well. Okay, so those two variables simply keep track of the row number and column number. And then finally I'll have a target cell variable, so dim target cell as range. Now all these will be helpful. They're not absolutely necessary, but they will be helpful for identifying where we're writing these values out to. I need to create a new worksheet and I want to capture a reference to it. So I'm going to say set output sheet equals this workbook dot worksheets dot add. And then inside my two loops, my two for each loops, I want to keep track of the row number and column number that we're on. So for each row number, so for each single row that we encounter, I want to add one to the current value of row num. Numeric variables in VBA begin at 0 or are initialized to 0. So we can simply say here row num equals row num plus 1. I want to do something similar in the for each single cell loop. So each time we go to a new column on that row, we're going to say col num equals col num plus 1. We also want to make sure that when we reach the end of a row, we reset the column number back to 0 before we move on to the next row. So in between the two next statements, we're simply going to say col num equals 0. What we can then do is capture a reference to the target cell. So we've got a variable called target cell as a range. And after we've calculated the row number and the column number, I'm going to say set target cell equals output sheet dot cells, open some round brackets and say row num, comma, col num. And that makes it much easier to manipulate that cell. So we can say on the next line, we can say target cell dot value equals, and then we can say single cell dot text. So rather than writing it to the immediate window with debug.print, in fact I'll just comment that line out, we can now write it out into an actual cell on the worksheet. Having done that, let's head back up to the original subroutine, click somewhere within there, and then we can run that subroutine. We're returning the scraping websites list, so that's 9 rows plus the headers. And if once that's finished, we switch back into Excel, we will find that we get all those values written out into the worksheet. So we're basically at this point at the same stage we were with our single instruction from earlier. But now we've also got the ability to capture the hyperlinks, which is what I wanted to do. Okay, so we're getting closer. The next thing we'll do is have a look at how to grab the hyperlink from the last cell on each row. And we have a few choices for how to do this, but let's focus on the important parts. First of all, we need to know how to capture the hyperlink itself. We've got the text from the cell by using the text method. To get the hyperlink, what we need to do, if we navigate to a table which has some hyperlinks in it, if I right click on one of those and choose to inspect it, you can see hopefully over here, we've got a tag with an A next to it. So the A tag represents a hyperlink. There's a particular attribute of that tag called href, which actually stores the address, the URL that the thing links to. And that's the particular thing that we need to capture. Now, each cell in the last column of the row contains a single hyperlink, except for the header cell. But the other cells on the same row don't contain any A tags. So we need to be slightly careful about how we get a reference to the web element. For me, I think the safest thing to do, rather than trying to check for each cell we encounter whether the A element exists, I'm just going to capture all the A elements within each table cell, and then if the count of those A elements is 0, I won't bother doing anything. If the count of those A elements is more than 0, I'll get the href of the first A tag that I've captured and then assign that as a hyperlink to the target cell in Excel. And if all that sounded like a little bit too much to take in one go, let's break it down and do it step by step. So the first thing to do is grab all of the hyperlinks sitting within the table cell we're currently looking at. Back in the VB editor, let's scroll down into the process table subroutine, and I'll declare a new variable that says something like dim video links as Selenium dot web elements. What we can then do is scroll down into the for each loop, which is looking at each single cell. And after we've written out the text into the cell, let's add another line. In fact, let me just get rid of this comment. I don't need that any longer. I'm going to say set video links equals single cell dot find elements by tag. So find elements by tag, open some round brackets and some double quotes, and look for the A tag. Close the double quotes, close the round brackets, and that will do one of two things. It will either return a collection consisting of 0 items when there are no tags to find or no A tags to find, or a collection containing the one single hyperlink belonging to that last cell in the row. So at this point, we're going to check if videolinks.count is greater than 0, then we want to do something. So we can head down a couple of lines and then say end if, and then inside that if statement, just to explain how to get access to the href attribute, I first of all need to be able to reference the first item in the video links collection. I can do this by saying video links, open some round brackets, and then just pass in the index number of the element I want to return. The indexing in Selenium for VBA, or Selenium Basic at least, has a base of 1. So the first element is numbered as 1 rather than 0, as you sometimes encounter in different libraries. So video links 1, and then I can refer to the attribute method, and then I can specify the particular attribute by passing in its name. So in some double quotes, I'm going to say href, and then close the double quotes and the round brackets. Just to show what that returns, I'm going to add a debug.print statement to the beginning there. Then I'm going to clear the contents of the immediate window. And then I'm going to head back up to the original subroutine and click somewhere inside it and then run it. So again, we're looking for scraping websites, so we should return 9 rows, and therefore we should return 9 hyperlinks. And if we look in the immediate window, that is indeed exactly what we get. So we've successfully returned the href attribute of the A tags for the individual cells. Next, we can assign the hyperlink to the cell in the worksheet. So let's scroll down again into that same little if statement where we've just used the debug.print statement. I'll comment that out, and then I'll refer to the target cell variable. So again, target cell is the range object in Excel. So I can say target cell dot hyperlinks dot add. And then there are 2 parameters to fill in: the anchor object, which will just be the target cell, and then the address that we're trying to reference, which is what we've just returned from the href attribute. So I can just copy and paste videolinks1.attribute href, and that will assign a hyperlink to the text in that cell. Okay, so we're pretty much there. Let's just head back up to the original subroutine again. I'll just tidy up in Excel as well. I've got a couple of extra worksheets here that I don't need at the moment, so let's get rid of those. And then if we return to the Visual Basic Editor, select the previous subroutine or the original subroutine and run that one again. Once again, returning the scraping websites table. When I return back to Excel, I now have the hyperlinks added to the visit text in those cells. So at this point, we're basically there. We've done all the hard work using Selenium to get the data out into an Excel worksheet, including the hyperlinks. Apart from this, all we need to do is the tidying up. And this is just fairly bog standard Excel code at this point, so there's not much to see here. But just for the sense of satisfaction of completing the entire example, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes making sure that the table columns are all the correct width, turning it into an actual table so we can quickly sort it, and then adding the basic interface to sheet 1 so we can type in and then click a button to return some videos. So back into the Visual Basic Editor first, I'm going to head down to the end of the process table subroutine, and after we finish looping, I'm going to refer to the entire region of the table that we've just created. So I can do that in several ways, but output sheet.range a1.current region, and I want to refer to the entire column of the current region, and then I want to apply the autofit method to that to make, sorry, not autofilter, I meant autofit, to make sure all the columns are the correct width. What I can then do is convert that region into a table so I can quickly sort and filter it. So I can say, once again, I can say output sheet.listObjects.add, and then I can set the source of this, so I can say source : equals, and then I can say output sheet.range a1.current region. So I'll just copy and paste that from the previous line. So having done this, if I scroll back up to the original subroutine and then run it again, I should find that the output is a little bit neater looking this time. So back into Excel, and there we go, there's a nicely formatted table with all the columns the correct width. Finally, we could head back to sheet 1, and then we could add some basic interface to this, maybe type in some text into cell B2, search for videos on, and then we'll use cell C2 to enter our text. So we can do some basic formatting here, search for videos on, I'll just change the background colour and the font colour. Nothing particularly complicated. This is not my forte, as I'm sure you'll be aware if you've watched any of my previous videos. And then let's just type something into there. Let's type in, let's go for Excel VBA, that returns quite a few videos. And then let's add a button to run our main subroutine. So I can head to the Developer tab in the ribbon and head to the Insert tool, and then I'll add a basic form control. So I'll click on the button and then draw this into the cells below. If you want your button to line up exactly with the edges of cells, just hold down the Alt key on the keyboard, the one at the left-hand side of your spacebar, while you draw your button, and it will snap to the edges of cells, which is kind of satisfying. I'll assign the only macro scrape WiseOwl videos, click OK, and then I can alter the text on the button. I'll call it find videos. And then we just need to modify the original subroutine to read the contents of cell C2, preferably checking that range C2 is not empty. Let's head back to the Visual Basic Editor and scroll all the way up to the top of our original subroutine. I'm just going to modify the code name of sheet 1 here so it's got a more sensible name. I'll call this one search sheet. And then after my list of variable declarations, but before I do anything else, I'm going to say if search sheet.range c2.value is an empty string, then, and if, and then inside that if statement, I'll simply exit from the subroutine. Why not? I don't even need to display a message, I think. I can then scroll down a little further and find my send keys method, and rather than writing in this explicit search phrase, I can remove that and simply refer to search sheet.range c2.value. And that's the whole thing done. So back into Excel at this point, we can type in any search phrase we like, but when we click the videos or Find Videos button, it will fire up Chrome, go to the WiseOwl homepage, type in our search phrase, return all the results, find the video tutorial section, expand the table, copy every single cell from the table. It takes quite a long time here because of all the rows. There are 126 results here. We can speed that up a little bit actually by just switching some basic settings in Excel. So yeah, but the end result is you get your table listed out onto a brand new worksheet. So I think that brings us to the end of the video on basic web scraping techniques using Selenium. As I said at the start, it's not the most sophisticated example you'll ever create, but it does hopefully lay the groundwork for how Selenium works and gives you the fundamental techniques you will always need to rely on, whichever website you're trying to scrape. So hopefully it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for you using Selenium to scrape any website using any browser. Thanks for sticking with it, particularly if you are still watching. I appreciate this one's been quite a long one. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.